of view. Now, briefly, because we desire to provide a little bit of an outline for some of these ideas of what you call intuition, psychic manifestation, telepathy, what we call telempathy, allow us to delineate some of these ideas. Because you are now beginning to blend, consciously becoming more aware of the fact that you always are in telepathic connection with each other, allow yourself to recognize what telepathy actually is. Many of you in the old definitions have said, oh, it's reading each other's minds. Well, in a sense, yes, but not really, mechanically speaking. You don't literally read each other's minds directly. The idea is that telempathy is emotionally activated, which means the more you identify with an individual or an object or a circumstance, the more you mimic its frequency, the more you operate on a similar wavelength. If you operate on a very similar wavelength to something else, it means your prism, belief, emotion, thought, translates the homogeneous one energy into the same type of thought patterns as the other identity you are mirroring. So it's that you have the same type of thoughts at the same time. Not that you're directly reading someone else's mind. It's that you're mirroring them. Therefore, the easiest way to generate conscious telepathy in your reality is to identify as strongly as you can with everyone or anyone in it. And the way you do that is through what? Unconditional love. Love is the prime vibration, the prime chord of harmonics in your reality. That's why individuals in your society that you recognize as being in love very often are the individuals that very obviously know what each other is thinking at any given moment. Don't you all recognize that lovers very often know each other's thoughts? It's because they are on such a similar wavelength that they have similar thoughts at the same time. It seems as if they're reading each other's minds. They're just being absolute reflections back to each other. So unconditional love will allow your society to know itself, both individually and collectively, will allow you more and more of what you call psychic intuition. Now, we recognize that you have generated many ideas you call scientific notions on your planet, and this is all well and good and very valid. The idea, however, now, as it is being applied to what you call psychic phenomena, is being a little bit misunderstood. What you call old definitions of scientific thought are being applied to something that you are not yet familiar with in a conscious way, and it is being assumed that the idea of psychic manifestation must fit the old paradigm of scientific investigation. And it can, but not by the definitions that you have created. Simply, you are using old tests for something that does not fit those tests. There are rules, so to speak, laws that govern the idea of psychic manifestation. There are reasons why it works and reasons why sometimes it doesn't work. But simply is that you are still gathering together an understanding of what those reasons are. We will outline briefly a few of the laws of psychic functioning. The idea, first and foremost, is that we have discussed that everything is one thing. That is how you are able to be connected to anything at all. And identification, the matching of a frequency, will put you strongly in touch with that thing. However, if certain conditions aren't met, you will not get a manifestation of psychic or telepathic functioning. One of the prime manifestations, one of the prime laws, I shall say, of this idea, one of the prime definitions is as follows. Just like electricity, for it is very similar in many ways, psychic functioning will always take the path of least resistance. What does that mean? It means as follows. Let's say you have an individual that comes up to another individual that says, yes, all right, I'm psychic. Oh, yeah? Well, all right, let's prove it. You tell me what I'm thinking. What did I have for breakfast today? If you can't tell me, you're not psychic. Now, the individual who is asking the question, looking for the proof, already knows the answer. Why should the answer come to another individual who doesn't know the answer if one of the two individuals in the interaction already has the information they need? It short-circuits the ability of the other person many times to know the information, because the information is already known within the collective event. It's the path of least resistance. Understand? The paramount idea is the information already accessible in an easier way? Yes, it is. One person already knows the answer. So that's it, the fulfillment of the interaction. That's how it works. Secondly, this can be to some degree overcome by the second law. The great need or desire to know the information. If that person doesn't care what you had for breakfast, if it doesn't excite them to know what you had for breakfast, it is unlikely they are going to be able to generate an identical enough wavelength of interest with you to care and know what you had for breakfast. It all depends on need and desire, because that activates the emotional engine, gets the juices flowing. If that isn't fulfilled, then the idea in that sense will not necessarily come about. Third issue, allowance, spontaneity, confidence. In other words, many of the things you call psychic interactions will take place quite spontaneously without expectation in the daily normal course of the interactions you have in life. In other words, the laboratory in which to search for these things is not necessarily the laboratories your scientists think, but the laboratory of spontaneous life itself, because it is emotionally activated. It is not the dry, mental, cerebral effect many of you have been taught to think it is. An analogy would be as follows. If someone pulled someone into one of your laboratories and wired them all up, and they were very nervous and uncomfortable, uncertain about their surroundings and unfamiliar, and not feeling that the individuals around them really cared for them one way or another, nor did they really care for what they were doing, nor understand what they were doing, then if one of those scientists came up to them and said, all right, now on the count of 3, fall in love with me. And if you don't fall in love, there is no such thing as love. That is a more appropriate analogy to the idea of why psychic ability does and doesn't function, because it's empathic in nature. And if the individual is not confident, is not supported, is in that sense faced with the idea of what you call bias and or skepticism, if they are not in that sense made comfortable nor allowed to build their confidence, then that is also going to short-circuit the idea of spontaneous interaction. Fourth law, personal interpretation. Many individuals, even when they allow themselves the ability to circumvent the path of least resistance in that way, that do have a strong desire to function in that sense, that are confident enough to do it, may still not understand that each and every individual has their own set of definitions and may simply filter the information through that set of definitions. They will be getting the correct and valid information, but it may seem incorrect and invalid to the individual doing the testing because it doesn't come in the way they expect to hear it. As follows. Let us say you use the idea again of your deck of cards. Let us say the individual holding the cards is holding the ace of spades. Now, what the ace of spades means to them may be what gets transmitted to the other individual attempting to determine what the card is. If the ace of spades means to the individual holding the card that it is a winning card, that they have perhaps won a game with that card, then that meaning, that intention is what will transmit to the other individual. The other individual will pick up on the idea, winning card. If the individual has played a different game and the winning card for them was the Queen of Hearts, the first impression they will get is, Queen of Hearts. No, you're wrong. There's no such thing as psychic functioning. But they did not stop to realize that what the individual was picking up on was the basic intention, the basic interpretation, the definition that was being given to the idea of the card, and they translated the meaning of the card personally, accurately. Are you following along what we are saying? Yes. The idea simply is that these basic rules do exist, and if this structure is adhered to, then you can generate as many repeatable cases of psychic manifestation as you care to. If you measure the event in the laboratory it was designed to be measured within. You cannot take measurements off of a cube of ice if your laboratory is a furnace. You must measure something within an environment that is conducive to the support of the thing you are measuring. It is simply that your definitions of psychic phenomena have not yet been clarified to the point where you understand what you're looking for and what to measure. But these things are changing in your reality, and this forms some of the basic foundations of the fundamentals of the mechanics of what you call metaphysics. Now, metaphysics in that sense, it is not something truly extra to the physical reality. It is simply different aspects that you have not yet clearly defined in ways that are applicable, workable in what you call your day-to-day life. But this is changing. It's all a matter of how you define it. Even what you call now, some of your leading-edge physicists are beginning to realize that your physical reality is only what you define it to be. So what you call the idea of physical reality and what has been called in the past metaphysical reality is beginning to blend its definitions to some degree. We perceive this will continue to accelerate in your reality until there is an understanding that consciousness itself must be a part of any scientific equation that you have, because your perspective utterly determines the reality you get. You get the result you design the experiment for. And that's all you get. Your perspective to begin with, your bias to begin with, determines the outcome. A skeptic will always be able to say, I told you so, because that's what they believe going in. Remember that skepticism is not a scientific point of view. Open-mindedness is. Skepticism, even though we understand the original root of the word means simply to know, skepticism in your society generally now translates into a preconceived bias in a particular direction that you want, in a sense, something else to disprove. Rather than simply going into something with an open mind and saying, is there something in here that works for me or not? It is not necessarily representative of whether it must fit into those things you empirically think you know to begin with or not. It all does fit, because there are no extraneous creations. Each and every one of you fits, or you wouldn't exist. Understand?